What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the BlockHash Podcast, your number one resource for all that is happening across the emerging tech space. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch this show. Today, I'm joined by Aleks. She's the head of art at Trilitech. We're going to dive into that today. We're going to talk about Alex's background a little bit. We're going to talk about the art world in Web3. We're going to talk about Tezos, use cases, and a number of other things on their roadmap here in 2025. Aleks, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me today.
Likewise, pleasure's all mine. To kick it off, would love to learn a little bit more about yourself, if you don't mind telling us a bit about your background, maybe how you found yourself in the Web3 world, if it came from an art perspective or from something else. What's your journey kind of been like?
Well, my journey has been a long journey. I have a background in I studied politics and IR, and I looked at photography and political photography, but at first I worked more on the traditional side of things. So I did the art business master's degree at Sotheby's Institute to transition from a consulting world to the art world and worked at different arts institutions, so gaining experience at the gallery, auction house, art fair to really see different businesses and how they run within the ecosystem. But very quickly, I realized that I enjoy an environment of growth and innovation. And fortunately, I made my way to work at an emerging startup, being a second employee, which purchased the rights to operate the .art domain zone. So similar how you had .com, .org, and at that period of time, it was like 10, 15 years ago, they started releasing top level domains, and the founder of our company purchased the rights to operate the .art domain. And so we brought it to the market starting from 2016, 2017, and worked with absolutely, I would say, anyone in the arts, because technically everything could have been under the .art umbrella, whether it's comics, whether it's sword art, whether it's museums. And I think that really kind of ignited my passion for arts and technology and working especially with digital artists because they were the most native and they were the ones sort of understanding and sort of like the broader vision of bringing technology into the art world. And ever since then, I fell down the rabbit hole, met many interesting pioneers, you could say, in the space. And when blockchain came about, it was sort of a natural transition for me to get a bit more deeper into this world.
Nice, nice. And then once you became a little bit more deeper into this world, what are some of the things you kind of started exploring? Did that kind of revolve around, art in the space or NFT projects, or what was kind of like your first ordeal that you spent the most time on, you'd say?
That's a good question. I think I was always a person that was interested in many things, and even if art is my primary passion for me, I needed to understand how technology works. How can you make a difference for the broader ecosystem? I've been curating early on, so one of the first curations we did was when the pandemic happened, and this very big historic art conference, Ars Electronica in Linz, couldn't take place. We were the partner that brought sort of the exhibition online, and we created first 2D and then the year after 3D environments where a lot of hundreds of artists could participate and exhibit their art. So curation always continued to be a big element in my work. But the need I saw the most was helping businesses and artists transition into understanding how blockchain can be used. What are some meaningful ways for them to be involved? So I was consulting a lot, both artists and different organizations, including charities like Arts of Wishes, where we would sometimes host in real life talks for the art world and educate them about some of the practices and innovations taking place. And then I was recruited for like more permanent positions in the space. I was the head of marketing at a blockchain gaming startup building a distributed game engine. And then I was head of partnerships at Join, which was another product led company bringing tools for curators and businesses to sort of have a more meaningful and efficient way of distributing sort of like content to their exhibitions. And that followed also where I ended up here. But there were so many incredible stories. Like we launched charity initiatives and helped raise like over $1 million for Ukraine when the war started through NFTs, or advising robotics companies about how they can send NFTs to the moon. Like so many things happened over the last several years, and it's been a very interesting journey. And I think right now some areas of interest is also how digital communities and the art world are both having a very big effect on where sort of this art on the blockchain shift is going to move next.
Yeah, that's amazing. It seems like you've done quite a lot in this space already. And then now you're with Trilitech, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about that and maybe what the mission is?
Yeah, so Trilitech is something that typically we stay a little bit in the background, and the primary focus for us is to push forward and help with adoption for use cases on the Tezos blockchain. We have different verticals. So my colleagues, they run DeFi, gaming, and sort of my role is the head of the arts. And as many people know, art on Tezos is a very strong area. It's one of the longest standing sort of like I would say communities that really fosters almost like an organic underground scene, combined with world-class museums like MoMA or Musée Orsay embracing the blockchain for the first time, thanks to sort of Tezos and the technology use cases it offered. So it's a big responsibility for me to sort of like represent, but it's an incredible place to be and opportunity to really make an impact. And I would say not just for art on Tezos, but more broadly for the adoption of art on the blockchain.
And what does your role kind of consist of as head of art? Like, what are some of your day-to-day things that you work on?
I guess people who know me and publicly, they see the side of things where we do a lot of ambassador work. And we also run programming in the sense that we have, say, 20 to 30 things in real life that we support throughout the year. Our team's level of involvement is varies. So sometimes it's a project that we start from start to finish. We approach someone, we're like, we have this project, let's work together. We're going to both financially and time wise support it. And then it results either in an exhibition or in a new tooling system, or a program or a residency. Sometimes people come to us and they're like, we have this incredible idea. And then sometimes they need help from our engineering team. So we kind of connect them with products, or they need, like, from a legal standpoint, us to help them draft things. So we really help make things happen. A big part of it is also helping businesses that sort of are within the Tezos ecosystem to thrive and get to better models, and helping them from a strategic standpoint in terms of opportunities, in terms of like the strategy they're going to pursue. A lot of it often is also internal ambassador work. So how people who come to work in the company, like how do we educate them about things that are prominent working cross teams, like how can DeFi enable more activity, or how can gaming sort of like have an intersection with art. um, so I would say it's a very big mix, and I'm pulling different skill sets, like product wise, curatorial wise, art wise, communication wise, PR wise. You have to really know how to wear different
A
hats.
lot of, yeah. No, interesting. And yeah, I was going to ask you about that too when you brought up businesses. Like, do you guys work with a lot of creators, entrepreneurs, brands and organization, technologists, VCs? It seemed like there's quite a few different clients or avatars that you work with from the website. I was curious, like, is there one in particular that you work with the most, or it's kind of like everybody like on different things?
There's definitely a concentration around certain areas. So we have some curators that have been around, that have the experience needed to make an impact, to do a quality job. So with these teams, we might work more often on having an in real life presence. In terms of businesses, I would say maybe like a few, definitely. Like we offer a lot of mentoring. Like I would say Object is where the biggest amounts of activity happen. So naturally, we have many more sessions and meetings with them throughout, like every week. There are other teams that received grants that we also almost speak weekly. Like we have a generative platform, Edit Art. We have Infinite Ink platform. Also, like when other teams were launching, it's sometimes not even monetary. It's just keeping the conversation going and helping with product ideas. Like there was creator-led platform Subject that we spent several months in discussions before it officially launched. So yeah, it's a busy it's a busy day.
And then you mentioned there being quite a history of art on Tezos, right? Why do you think that is? Is there anything in particular that gives Tezos maybe a little bit of a unique advantage for creators or for artists or for those that are, you know, being a little bit more exploratory? Like what have you kind of seen from that chain in terms of that being a good place to build?
The most important was the organic growth it saw because of time. I think timing was everything. So when Tezos was first built, there was this whole conversation between proof of work and proof of stake, and it was one of the chains that a lot of pioneering artists in computer programming chose and became very big ambassadors for. And at the time, you really had like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Tezos were like the first three. And Tezos was the only alternative for people who had an issue with environmental concerns. So artists like Memo Acton, Johnny Lemercier, Mario Klingman became very big advocates for the chain, which resulted in incredible generative art and AI art, historical works and artists coming, like the developer of Deep Dream, Alexander Mordvintsev, started minting early on Tezos, Gene Kogan. Like it's like a history book. And then at the same time, a developer in Brazil received a small grant also from a hackathon and pivoted into building a marketplace called Hicket Nunc, which also thanks to the timing, it was the beginning of the 2021 bull run. The fees were insanely affordable compared to anywhere else, like on Tezos, thanks to the way sort of Arthur and Kate built the technology. It enabled artists to, for a small fraction of a price anywhere else, to be able to buy and sell work. So I think the big reason is thanks to the technology that was being built, it made a very fair game. So even if you don't have a lot of money, you can still participate. Then the marketplace that was built obviously facilitated things. And then the reinforcements really came when the foundation stepped in and started investing a lot into programming. So there were initiatives like the VCA residency that was fully funded by the Tezos Foundation, or festivals, Art Basel presence. You would see Arts on Tezos inside the main hall of Art Basel in Miami, in Hong Kong. You had the Serpentine annual sort of like 2-year partnership with some of the most prominent gallery in UK that adopted blockchain for the first time. Musée Orsay in Paris, MoMA in New York. Now we're working with the Museum of Moving Image in New York. Investments into platforms. So I think a very big problem we're seeing is a lot of VC-led new chains, they heavily focus on transactions. And so when they invest in the marketplace, there is a tendency to how can we get the most transactions, and arts kind of gets left on the secondary. And I think very big difference I see is with the support of marketplaces like Object, that pressure isn't there, and they can still sort of like utilize the time the team has in supporting the community because they're not so pressured of, oh, we need to have 1 million transactions today, we don't need to launch a coin, we don't need to do this. And I think that benefits directly the community because the community has a social layer of conversation that's not pressured by certain external factors of commodification of arts. Then the in real life events allow people to connect, to have something to talk about. We just had an incredible week in Lisbon, we had an event. In Basel, in Switzerland, we had a week-long event of facilitated conversations, panels, exhibitions. Now in New York, and this continues to reinforce that sense of community. So I think a mix of technology and interest in allowing people to sort of like have what they need to continue building and creating in this space has been a vital factor why it's a healthy ecosystem and continues.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. I wanted to ask you as well, maybe what you think about the future of art here on blockchain in general, on Tezos in particular, but just in general on blockchain as well. It seems like ever since 2021, like that was really a peaking point of everyone want to kind of explore what they could do with art on chain and maybe where that could go. And then it's been kind of quiet the last few years. I'm just kind of curious, are we going to see a renaissance in that again? Is it kind of going to change like the way that we go about those things on chain? Like, is it going to be NFT based, or are we going to be doing collections in different ways? How do you kind of see this evolving in the future on chain from an art perspective?
I think that it's important to reflect on the fact that most of the things we heard about during the bull run wasn't really art. It was collectibles and speculation. And it's been very unfortunate that journalists from sometimes respected magazines cared more about the tagline than the underlying innovation that was taking place. And I think what we're seeing now is a much healthier and stronger ecosystem where a lot of artists are seeing improved value and price for their works. So over the last several years, we saw a few careers of artists launch where they're gaining that momentum and getting to the next level. We also saw a lot more museums embracing art and technology. So um, we work with Heck, Basel, and ZKM, and they sort of like, well, indirectly they collect arts on Tezos. For example, Museum of the Moving Image has an annual programming of different artists' work. Toledo Museum is having a show this summer of also generative art. There are new museums that are almost solely focused on sort of like spotlighting digital, like the Museum of Arts and Lights. Um, I think it's incredible to see this institutional embrace, and also organizations like Art Basel, they continue exploring how can we tap into this new audience. And the reality of the situation is they need us more than we need them. And it's a very big debate right now where people are thinking that the art world is going to come in and start collecting art on the blockchain, but the reality will be it's going to be a cohesive sort of like collaboration where gallerists might start bringing their artists onto the blockchain. At the same time, we're going to see a lot of advisory services where sort of like if it's an institution, they're going to be hiring teams that are a bit more native to the space. Because a very big issue in the art world and in the museum world is how do we get more collectors? How do we get more audiences? And so something we as a community that's been pushing this forward for many years have to realize is that how do we not abandon what the culture of the space really is, and how do we kind of continue pushing our interests without trying to fit in just because it feels like the natural thing to do. And I'm seeing institutions that are independent of the old world coming in, like for example nodes or other investments made more by technologists who are launching their own cultural institutions to preserve sort of like the historical component of how this space has been evolving so far.
No, it seems like there's a lot of moving dynamics there. And it's great to see like the historical components, the communities still flourishing and finding ways to grow, and then also like the old legacy like art world as well, slowly starting to come on chain and want to interact more. I think that's a really good sign long term that there's going to be that cohesion between Web3 and what art has existed as traditionally for so long. Another thing I wanted to ask as well is like, did you have any or are there any use cases in particular that maybe, stand out as, a good highlight example of, a project or a partner that Trilitech has been working with? I've noticed a bunch of things from Flow Sports to Red Bull Racing, and I'm sure the list goes on and on. But is there anything that stands out that you thought it was really cool or is having a big impact?
I think I would speak from obviously the art side of things. There has definitely been, I think, the presence worldwide, like the in real life events, yes, they do have an impact. So maybe I should separate the two. So in terms of real world use cases, I think Musée Orsay in Paris has definitely um, the partnership brought basically a series of exhibitions, and one of them was an installation by Agoria, where people could come in and using one of our marketplaces, FX Hash, and sort of our team worked on the product side, how we can make it interactive. So visitors would come into the museum, and the sculpture had light falling on it, and the light would it would sort of rotate. So at every certain amount of time, it would rotate in a way that the QR codes would be formed out of a shadow, and you scan the QR codes, and then you go onto the sort of page, and then you have to blow into your phone, and based on that, an algorithmic sort of image that was trained on some of the artworks in the museum would create an artwork that represents more the body of work of the artist Agoria. And he worked with several collaborators on it, and that project kind of showed different aspects of technology, like it's minting, it's interactive, it also pays a tribute to the history of the museum itself. So there were a lot of use cases like this that we did with museums. But at the same time, I think, and based on my previous experience working in tech companies, the real conversion happens online, where the audience is digital native and they already have coming online, speaking to different communities online as their sort of everyday habit. And in that sense, I'm particularly excited about some of the partnerships and programming we've been doing, like curatorial programming that has a very big online element. So one of them is we've been working with Annika Mayer from Second Guess since sort of earlier this year. And it's been a series of a virtual sort of exhibition in partnership with the museum, where visitors could explore the works and the history of the project sort of through a scrolling sites. Then there was a series of releases on Object Marketplace. There was a very sort of strongly backed storyline about the project. It culminated also in several physical shows. There's a catalog being written about it. There are certain other projects, secret projects that are released later this year in association with it. And I think these are the type of projects I'm excited about, where you can sort of build a legacy in history, tapping into different areas. And it has also brought a lot of sort of recognition for some of the pioneering artists. Like, for example, the physical show featured artist Tamiko Thiel, and Tamiko Thiel has been working for several decades. She's one of the sort of you could say, early creators of AR interactive art. So I think in the long run, these projects would definitely stand out once we reflect and look back, what has been done, what is art on the blockchain. These are the things. One of the sort of basically creators created an AI agent that became officially accepted as a student to the University of Vienna. So it's becoming more and more entangled with a more traditional, I would say, body. And I think that's how we really bring in new audiences, when there's a very clear use case and history and academic background that goes into a project and makes everyone feel involved. So let's see. I don't think anyone has really cracked what is next, unless unless you're a casino, which is a very popular use case across a certain chains. I think art is definitely one of the most sort of beneficial things we've seen on the blockchain. I mean, I worked with digital artists before NFTs, and I remember how hard it was for them to sell. Like, I worked with researchers from Google, like DeepMind, and for them, art was more of a hobby. Like, they would consider themselves artists, but they would barely ever sell. And I remember very vividly, like, our first sale on, like, when I was curating on Tezos in 2021, we sold out in a week, and it was more than the artist sold in 3 years. And that was such a crazy shift in perception of ownership. And I think that was the missing part, because digital arts existed from the 50s, making it as a physical manifestation existed since the 50s. There were many wonderful academic bodies like Rhizome, Ars Electronica. They were all documenting and talking about it in the art world on their own terms. Like, this is not nothing new. It's been like 60 years. Art Basel used to have a video section. Like, many galleries represent video artists. But the real shift happened when we no longer had to play by the rules, and we could just have fun on the internet, and also be able to commodify it in a way that kind of like proves ownership. But at the same time, that connection you have, direct connection with the artist, it's irreplaceable. And I think that is the real innovation here. And I think that's what we really should double down on moving forward.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, right? The creative freedom and the ownership and all the benefits that come along with it. I think that's what a lot of artists and creators really love about this space in Web3. So, what else is on the roadmap this year for Trilitech, but also for yourself as well? Any exciting announcements, updates, new partnerships, things coming here on the timeline, as well as maybe any kind of engagements? Are you guys going to be attending any events, conferences, maybe exhibitions? What's on the horizon here for you guys?
I guess by the time of the release, this would have been in the past, but we have Test Dev in 2 days. So at Test Dev, we would have presented a 360 immersive show of art on Tezos, together with a series of panel and conversations. Up next, we have an annual partnership with Bitform's Gallery in New York, which is the longest standing digital art gallery in the world, with 25 years of experience. So currently there's the Zancan show. And then we're going to continue with a series of programming throughout the year, which we're really excited about. We are also in the process of releasing a new residency program, which more will be shared online, and busy planning for the other art world events. And also, so we follow typically either the art world calendar or the NFT world calendar. This fall there is the Paris photo, where we're partnering with Artverse Gallery in Paris to present a series of artists creating on Tezos. Then it will be followed by Miami Art Week, Art Basel Miami, where we're also sort of like preparing our programming right now. But there's not more I can share at this point of time.
And then where can people go to keep up with everything and all these updates as they kind of come alive and roll out? And if you're a business, if you're an entrepreneur, maybe you're an artist or a creative, how can you also reach out to Trilitech and get some assistance and get some help? Maybe you want to build something. Where are all the places that people can go and where you would send them to?
So I think the best, if you're an artist and you want to like find opportunities for curated opportunities, Object is a really good account to follow, because we typically, like, even if we support something, we outsource the curation to people in the ecosystem, because it's just, we're a small team, like we can't take care of everything. So on the individual level, I would follow the key curators, and on Objects there are many galleries. Galleries is basically either an online or an in real life curator is curating every month or every second month an exhibition. So I think that's a really good way, like by connecting with these curators and expressing interest and saying, this is my body of work, here's my portfolio, please consider me. But at the same time, looking out for open calls, because there are definitely a lot of open calls coming through these channels. If you're a collector, typically following different team members, well, you can follow me. You can follow also object employees like Rob or Kika or Raquel. They frequently share interesting things. Unknown Collector and Rob, they both run a Telegram channel where they share updates of new available arts or like something is listed. So that's an excellent resource. In terms of like general updates about the ecosystem, every Friday for the last year, our team has been publishing Art on Tezos Friday recap, where we summarize basically the highlights of what has happened and some of the things not to miss to collect this week, which is a massive undertaking, but we keep going. So I would say these are some of the resources you can use.
Excellent. And if anyone wants to connect with you, do you have a X? Do you have a LinkedIn? Where can people find you?
Yeah, I have an X, which is appearing right now here because it's very difficult to spell out. It's Alja Perez.
Awesome. Aleks, appreciate you taking the time today. It's been great learning more about what you've been doing in the space, in the art world here in Web3, as well as what Trilitech is kind of working on and the way it's supporting the ecosystem for creatives around Tezos in particular. Continue all the great work and keep me updated on everything that's going on. And as you have more updates, I know you have some like secret things that are coming up on the timeline. As those kind of reveal themselves, let me know, and would love to do a part two as well, and maybe dive a bit deeper into some of those as well. But no, really appreciate the conversation. It's been really great.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me today.